Okay, it's 10:30 and I guess we can start. Good morning, everyone. Happy Foster Family Month. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle and I'm the Communications Coordinator for BC Federation of Foster Parent Associations. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this webinar from the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations. A recorded version of this webinar will be made available on the BCFFPA YouTube channel. We will also be sending everyone a copy of the PowerPoint slides and some resources. All participants will be muted. If you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A box below your screens, and our solutions team will answer the question during the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. You can also raise your hand using the Zoom hand raise function and wait for the host to call your name before unmuting your microphone. If you're watching the recording and you have a question, or if you come up with a question after the webinar is over, you're welcome to email your questions to office@bcfosterparents.ca. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our presenters, Annette and Krissy Ramcharan.
Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Annette Harding, and I'm speaking to you today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Lekwungen speaking people of the Esquimalt and Songhees Nation here on Vancouver Island. And I'll let Krissy introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Krissy Ramcharan, Solutions Program Coordinator. I'm joining you today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Solo people.
Thanks, Krissy. So today we've called our seminar, the webinar, the Solution Program Basics, and what we're going to cover today is what is the Solutions Program and who is involved, and how does the Solutions Program work for foster families when they're requesting support and advocacy. And as Michelle says, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. And just sometimes people think of questions as they're going through, so do feel free to write them down as we're going, and then we can get to them all at the end. Thank you. Next. So what is the Solutions Program? We decided to describe it this way. It's a kind of a multi-approach program where we're working in both the primary work is in individual and systemic support and advocacy, and that's what we're going to mostly talk about today. But we do a great deal of our work in the sense with community partnerships. There are a number of agencies out throughout the province who provide foster family support services, and we work totally in partnership with those. So for example, we may get some referrals from those agencies who are already working with a foster family, and they want us to also join them in their support and advocacy. So both Krissy and myself do that. She's going to talk about that a little bit later. And also in community partnership, by that we mean we start to notice that sometimes in communities there starts to be a number of individuals coming forward with some issues, and it seems to be similar issues with among the foster families. And so in those ones we're tending to want to talk more with the ministry and the DAAs in those communities, as well as the local agencies, on how we can improve or how we can strengthen partnerships and relationships. And so we had been planning to do a number of community meetings and processes to do that this year, but unfortunately the COVID situation prevented us from going to be in communities to work with them. So we're having to find some creative ways to continue working in that community partnership building way with communities throughout the province. And hopefully next year, without COVID, and we can travel again. And the other big part of our program is from both the individual systemic support and the community partnership work, we gather together all that data and roll it up into sort of what are the key themes and trends, and provide that feedback to both the ministry and DAAs at the provincial level. Thanks. Next slide, thanks. So a major part of our solutions program process and practices is we need to be guided by a framework, which we've just, for want of a better term, called it the practice and policy framework. And this is a framework that we use whenever a foster family makes contact with us for support. So we have to follow and look at the situation the foster parent is dealing with, and look at it in relation to what are the foster parent rights, what is all the policies, legislation and guidances that we have to, that help us see how foster families are to be worked with and how they should be treated, what the standards of foster homes say, what the foster family handbook says. Another major component we look at very carefully are the family care home agreements and other types of contracts that family care homes may have, including all the components and schedules to make sure everything is being followed there. We also take into account the rights of children and youth in care in all of our work, as well as the PRIDE model of practice, which is the Ministry's new model of training for foster parents to ensure that everyone knows about working with children and their families, working on permanency, working with Indigenous communities. And also we follow the Aboriginal policy and practice framework for British Columbia. Now we're expecting there's going to be some more and additional policies coming through with the recent legislation changes for Indigenous, working with Indigenous children and families. So again, we just keep up to date with those. And in our Solutions Program manual, which again, this is going to all be made available to you sent afterwards, it really explains that we are a formal program and that we do have to follow all privacy and confidentiality guidelines and that kind of thing, and explains exactly how we process and do the program. So anyone is welcome to read that. Now, before I go on, I should just say that BCFFPA has delivered a lot of support programs in the past. Quite often they were informal or volunteer-based supports that I know was happening all out throughout the province over many years. But most of these were volunteer and people trying to do that in amongst other things they're doing, and mostly it was foster parents trying to do this. So this time the BCFFPA in 2018 had some funding to fund this solutions program. So that's why I'm focusing on the sort of formal side of things a little bit here. Okay, next slide. So just sharing with you the key areas of support and advocacy that we provide. These seem to be the main areas of support, so we've kind of bundled them up into to show you what they are. So often we are working with people when they have contract and payment issues with the ministry or their DAA. And another big theme is teamwork and planning, where foster parents are feeling they're not being included in the child's care team and they're not being included in the planning for the team, for the child, but also have lots of stuff that they can offer and say. When people are going through family care home investigations, writing the policies, it says that they are entitled to support, and often this is a situation where we might join a local agency that's already providing support to a foster family, and we help to join in too. And similarly for quality of care reviews, we can help the person all the way through that process and sit with them as they go through that process. Similarly for practice complaints, and there can be a whole variety of those. And again, we just work with the foster parent in whatever way they need to address that situation with the team that they're working with. And then we had other concerns because every now and then we get something that's quite unique and we can't categorize it in that way. Next. Okay, so who is involved? We already introduced ourselves. So Krissy is the solutions coordinator, and she takes care of all the intake process and the initial screening, and she's going to go into some more detail after this to explain that to you. And then when a case is referred to me, I then carry on and provide the various types of support or advocacy or mediation that is needed in the situation. And then as we work through the situation, and by sort of mutual decision, it comes to a close. Usually it's mutual decision, it comes to a close between us and the foster family. Then we like to always do an evaluation process, like a service evaluation process that Krissy takes care of at the end. So now I'm going to hand it to Krissy, and she's going to talk a lot more about what actually happens if you do contact us for support.
Hi, everybody. My name is Krissy, the Solutions Coordinator. I will be talking to you today about our first contact, initial and intake process, the consent and screening, starting and storing the file in our secure database. You can go to the next slide. My role as a Solutions Coordinator is to determine what type of support a foster parent needs. During the screening, I will gather information and documentation for their file and provide brief support. There are two types of consent forms. The first is to gather and document information consent, which means is to gather all information and documentation regarding your case. The second is to, The second is to information sharing and meeting participation consent, which allows everyone from the solutions team to participate in all meetings during the process. All information is maintained, owned, and stored in the perpetuity in a secured database by BCFFPA. After the consent forms are signed and sent in, I will then refer that file to the Solutions Program Manager, Indigenous Perspective Society, or any agency in their area. Agencies and IPS also refer foster parents to us, and we work with the Solutions Program to give the best support and advocate as possible. During their process, I will also offer support and attend formal and informal meetings. I'm kind of like the air traffic controller, some would say. So I provide emotional support during the process, do follow-ups, check-ins, research information, whatever I can do to help to smooth the process for you. Once the process is completed, I will then send out an evaluation form to each client at the end of the process. I'll now hand it back over to Annette. Thanks, bye.
I have to unmute myself. Okay, so when Krissy has referred the family to me as a solutions manager, because sometimes it just refers it back out to an agency as well, or co-works with an agency. So when it's with me, I also review all the material that Krissy has already gathered from the foster family. And then I speak to the foster family in more depth about their situation. And together we plan for the supports or advocacy that they need. So I don't do anything that the foster parent isn't comfortable with. It must be a plan that we develop together. Obviously, we're looking for solutions and for a way to redress the situation, whatever that is. But it's very important that we develop that plan together. As I mentioned earlier about the solutions program policy and practice framework, I have to ensure that the situation fits with that, in that what it appears like from what I can tell from all the material and from my meetings and discussions with the foster family, I'm looking for, has all policy and practice guidance been followed correctly? Is the contract being followed? Are foster parents' rights being followed? I'm looking at the situation with that particular lens and making notes and getting things ready. Now, obviously, a major thing we tend to do, rather than it all being in writing, is usually people want to have a meeting. The foster parent wants to have a meeting with the ministry or the DAA, people concerned, to help resolve the situation. So I normally help with that first correspondence, and we tend to do a joint letter or email requesting a meeting, and then I will attend all the meetings that are needed with the foster parent, with the foster family. And where needed, sometimes the foster parent is wanting some other sort of, I call it technical support, but they also want to be fully armed and fully aware of all that they need to be. So we provide all that information to them as well, and including sort of interpreting the legislation or helping them understand what that means, etc. The other part that we do is because certainly for certain situations, such as a family home investigation or a quality of care review, the foster family has the right to request a further review from quality assurance of those situations if there has been a serious sanction or a certain outcome that they've received. And that's all outlined in policy. So I work with quite a lot of foster families who are going through those review processes or the complaints processes with the quality assurance branch of the ministry. And as Krissy says, on completion of service, which again is kind of mutually agreed upon between the foster family and ourselves, we just still like to send out an evaluation form, so that can assist us in quality improvement for ourselves and what we may need to do differently. So I thought we'd just give you a couple of examples from this of typical things I may do. We're hoping there's going to be questions, but I'll give you a typical example of a family care home investigation. So for an example of one of those, it's much preferable. I really like it when we can join it right at the beginning, like when the foster family first gets a letter which tells them they're going to be having an investigation. It's great when I or other support people can be with you all the way through, because we're in at each meeting and we can also hear everything. Sometimes, though, I only come in, sadly, at the end, and the foster parent didn't know they could have support, and now they're at the final meeting, and I come in then. But then it's often in those situations we're requesting a review and looking at the situation again. But as you know, as you all know out there, investigations are meant to only take 30 days, and so it looks like they could be resolved fairly soon, but rarely do they happen in that time frame. And so very often these do go on for several months, and we're just there with the foster family for however long it takes, and seeing it right through to the very end. And again, we're very in line with the foster parent in terms of all the correspondence, everything that's in writing. It's very important that I can see and read all that too. So if you sometimes say Krissy's being pushy or we need all that information, it's only because to see what it says for real, I can work out what may have should or should not have happened as well. Even in the letter, I've had some letters that have been very interesting as well. And another example, I'll give you another example of the, say, contract and payment situations that families we help with those situations. And again, what we value is working quite alongside the foster family and understanding in detail your contracts and payments. So we would be asking people to see their contracts, to see their payment histories, because there's a lot to work out. There's a lot of detail to work out, and and often between the foster family, ourselves, and the ministry or the DA, we can find out that actually there has been mistakes and things have been done not as they should have been. So all that research side of things, all that documentation side of things is very important for us, because it gives us like the evidence and the facts that we need to proceed and to help you in the best way that we can. So I'm going to leave it there, because we're hoping there's questions, and lots more could come up in the various questions that we might have. So I'll give it back to you, Michelle.
Okay, so to ask a question, you have a few options. The instructions are on your screens. For those who would like to use the Q&A and chat box, I will be reading your questions for Annette and Krissy to answer. Please write your questions as clearly and completely as possible. You can also click on the raise hand function if you would like to speak. Please wait for your name to be called before unmuting your microphone. So I see some questions on the Q&A box. Okay. First question. Can a foster parent ask for your help in seeking clarification for MCFT decisions?
Yes, definitely. That's a very good question. That's often one of the major reasons people ask us for help. That very often a decision has been made, and sometimes the foster parent wasn't involved in any way in that decision, wasn't even aware the decisions were being made. So yes, definitely we do work on that with people. And again, the policies clearly say that foster parents should be given reasons for decisions. So often that's a piece where we're helping them with, is finding out what were the reasons for that decision to get clarity. Are there support cases that can get refused? Well, we have a very broad mandate. Now, people are foster parents. Sometimes they have been past foster parents, in that they have already lost their fostering contract. But we would still work with them, because they're someone who's was a foster parent and lost their contract and now isn't a foster parent. So we would still support them. We have, this is more unusual, but I just want to let you know we can be quite broad, is we've also supported people who are kinship homes, who are out of care homes as well, because they have policies and things that they should be followed as well. So the only thing that might happen, I think that's you, Joy, is I've asked the question, is if it's completely out of scope, like there's absolutely there's no policy, there's no contract, there's nothing I can go to that can help us to contain what this one should be about. That might go. I haven't had any we've refused so far. Okay.
Sometimes foster parents don't ask for help for fear of retribution. How does the Solutions Program encourage foster parents to speak up or protect foster parents from consequences of speaking up?
Oh yes, that's a brilliant question. Yes, that comes up a lot. That comes up a lot, and very often people who actually call us tell us that, say, this has taken me a lot of courage, a lot of time to call you. Just, they're very afraid, and what most people are afraid of is, and feel they have been threatened actually, and tell us they have been threatened, is the children moving, and sudden things happening to their home. So the way we're trying to encourage people to speak up and wish to protect them from the consequences is that speaking up is so important, because when things are going wrong for you as individuals, they may also be going wrong for lots of other people, and there may actually be what we call more systemic issues that need to be addressed. And that was the kind of one where we're trying to say, let's go to the whole community. Let's look at this more broadly and not make it about, oh, just these individual foster parents. So I guess often the way we want to protect people from the consequences of speaking up is to try and do more of a that's where we wanted to do more of a collective activity with communities and say, let's as a community address this. This is not just happening to one or two foster families. Others may be afraid to speak up, but we're going to address this proactively and differently.
Okay. Do you also work with the RCUI or the ombudsperson when necessary?
Yes, we do. The RCUI is often involved jointly with us in a lot of the cases, I would say, because very often, quite rightly, the foster parent has contacted the RCUI as well, because it's often around the decisions in relation to the child that have been the major concern. So yes, they are involved. And the way we work with the ombudsperson is, as you know, when people have gone through the whole review and quality assurance process at the ministry, if they're not satisfied with that outcome, they can completely go to the ombudsperson. So in my role, I'm more help. I've written letters to the ombudsperson. I help the person connect with the ombudsperson and support them while they're with the ombudsperson. So in that sense, I do it.
Okay. Can foster parents choose how much personal information they want to share?
Oh, totally. Yes, totally. They could choose how much personal information they want to share. What we're really most interested in is what are the sort of the policy and practice and contractual issues that are in the situation. What is in relation to their personal information. They can choose to share as much of that as they feel comfortable with, but we don't need to know all that. We really are dealing a lot more in the facts and the evidence in the situation.
Do I still have to complete all the paperwork if my concern is as simple as a contract or policy question?
That's a good question. Krissy might want to answer this one too, because we do often just deal with just simpler questions, and we also don't necessarily want to do all the paperwork if that's all it wants to be. Like if a person just has a question, and they don't, you know, they don't want to go any further with that, like they just need the answer to the question, then yes, we could do things like that as a simpler, maybe Krissy, you want to add a bit more to that.
Those are actually called brief support. So I just do the research for you and I'll send it out in an email or whatever is easier for you. If once you've gathered that information that I've sent out to you and you feel that this is more of a bigger concern, then we can go ahead with filling out the consent forms and intake, which is, we'll do a proper file for you.
Can you give some examples of practice complaints and issues?
Yes, the main one we've had in terms of practice complaints and issues, main themes, I should say, that we've had is actually the direct practice of a social worker, where a foster parent feels that a social worker has spoken to them in a very, very mean or hurtful way, has been very disrespectful, where basically the social worker is not sort of following normal social work practice and ethics, let alone the ministry policies. So it's often things like that where it's more of a, and I guess it's more into the interpersonal relationship area is where sometimes some of these practice issues arise. So that's kind of an example of one we've had quite a few of.
Do you also assist when a caregiver wishes to make a complaint or appeal the outcome of an investigation or quality of care review?
Yes, as I spoke about in that last slide, yes, that's one of the major things we do is help people work their way through that process, because it is quite difficult and stressful, and you're waiting on other people waiting to call you. So often that's a situation where Krissy and myself would be continuing to support someone while they're waiting for those special phone calls to come from quality assurance and take them through that process.
If you refer to a local support agency, must the foster parent use the service, or can the foster parent ask for a different avenue of support?
Okay, right. What we do is we always want to check we always like to check with the foster family, and Krissy can talk about this more too, that do they know that there's a local service? Because sometimes people don't know that there was a local service available to them. And so we always make sure, but if there is one in their area, that they know about it. And then Krissy would always give them the option, we can refer you to there. We wouldn't make them go there. So if they're not, because sometimes for different reasons people might not want to go to their local agency and they're right in their town, and so they have the option of using us completely or using us in partnership with their local agency. Oh, yeah.
Krissy, do you have a follow-up?
Sorry.
Yes, so part of the intake process, one of the questions, are you aware of a local agency that's in your area, and would you want your contact information to be shared with them and we can work together? So it really is up to the foster parent what avenue they wish to take. A lot of the times they want as many soldiers in their corner, you would want to say it, you know what I mean? So usually it's a yes, and then we will partner with them and work together. Thanks.
Okay, what do the timelines look like in terms of resolving cases? Do you have cases that go on for months to a year?
Yes, the timelines vary a lot in terms of resolving cases. Some it depends on the type of situation it is as well. But some situations we have had resolved in a month, or we've had some 2 or 3 meetings and it got resolved and it worked well because we always want to know it works well from the foster parent's point of view. And other ones, no, we've got some that have gone on for more than a year and a half. We have, and those are the ones where we've worked with someone for a long time, but they've gone all the way through the process. Like the ones that are over a year, I've gone to the ombudsperson, like they are still working their way through. So we're not necessarily working with them as intensively all the way through that time frame, because often maybe intensive work may have been in the meetings and at the beginning. But we keep it open because periodically we check in on them, they check in with us, and we just like to keep offering that sort of emotional support as you're going through that. And very often people pop us a question and we answer their questions as they're going through those processes. So It varies. As I say, we have some cases that can close within a couple of months and others that go on for longer.
Okay. What does the systemic support process look like?
Yeah, the systemic support process looks a couple of ways. As I said to you, we collate all the information from the data that we've gathered on the themes and the trends and the concerns that foster parents have, the key issues that have been occurring, and as well as the outcomes and what has occurred, like what's been positive. So we want to give positive feedback as well. But in terms of when we see those systemic issues, we do a couple of things. So the minister, fortunately, the BCFFPA is able to have meetings with the provincial office of the ministry, and so myself, along with Jane Wilson, our executive director, and usually our president of our board, would go to a meeting with the ministry. Now we can't go to them in person anymore; they have to be virtual. But we bring to those meetings that our reports, our trends of what's been occurring, as well as our ideas or discussion about what could we do to change those things. Like what could be some things that could start to be addressed to change some of those things. The other way we'd want to do systemic support or advocacy, the other way we were hoping to do it this year, but we haven't been able to, is going into communities together and working with the local teams, the local foster families, local agencies that maybe their support agencies and ourselves, and truly working through what is the systemic issues of that community, because you don't want to say it's the same for everywhere. So we thought a valuable systemic approach would be to that area or that community, and work through what are your particular issues, what are the areas you need to resolve or strengthen, and then we build a partnership working agreement together. Some places have this working great all around I should say, some areas of the province have this already working really well, already have good partnership meetings, already have good connections. But there are other places where this isn't happening for them. And so those are probably the ones we're trying to concentrate on, are where they haven't got some of those systemic supports, and trying to build them in for them.
Okay. Do we have to be a BCFFPA member in order to access the program?
Krissy's going to answer that.
No, sorry, I wasn't sure. I apologize about that, guys. No, you don't have to be a BCFFPA member to access their program or to even get emotional support. Our line is available, office hours. You can just call us and we will definitely be there to help you.
Okay. Are there trainings available through the Solutions program, perhaps about policy?
Yes, that we did develop a training right at the beginning of the program, actually, and we delivered a couple of those trainings in the Lower Mainland so far. And again, we were hoping to be able to deliver them in other parts of the province, because yes, it is the way we designed the training was to prepare volunteers who might want to be Solutions volunteers to work in their local community. So we wanted to arm them with all the information that they need. So the training does go through that program and practice policy framework that I was talking to you about earlier. And then there's lots of other sort of tips and ideas in that training as well. So it is certainly something we are hoping to deliver again in the future. And whenever we would be going to these communities that I was talking about earlier, when we could do any community development work, we were definitely going to do sort of a joint session, maybe even with the foster parents and the social workers, of making sure we're all on the same page, like we all know the same. We want to guarantee, 100% guarantee, that everybody does know the same policies, the same key policies, the same key guidances that determine the work with foster families.
Have you been able to work with Indigenous Perspective Society to change the difference regarding notice period and contracts between DAA and MCFD? Are the DAA following the BCFFPA/MCFD policies?
Okay, that's a very good question and a tough question. So From our understanding, and we have asked the ministry this several times, the DAAs do follow the ministry policies, unless they have their own policies that may meet or beat the ministry policies. So if they have their own policies, they couldn't be any go less than. They couldn't take out, say, consultation with foster parents or something like that. They might add more, but they can't take it out. So there should not be any differences between notice periods, if that's the question. And because also the Family Care Home Agreement is a contract that was developed by the province, it's a legal contract, and the DAAs, from my understanding, and this was true when I worked in provincial office, that they also use that contract, and they haven't developed another one or a different one, but they do usually put then the title or the name of their agency on it instead of the ministry's name being on it. But it is a challenging area, and it's an area I'm working in a lot. And I also work quite strongly with April Reeve from Indigenous Perspective Society, who herself is also working a lot with the DAAs to help them to also see that they are following the same policies as the ministry, and that all foster parents around the province can sort of expect similar treatment and get the same, have the same expectations on them.
Okay. Are offices always open to dialogue or joint sessions?
So far, the majority that we've contacted have been. In fact, quite, for the last year, I'd say, whenever we send our requests in for a meeting, we get responses back very quickly, and we usually get the meeting very quickly. So that's good. In the early days, I think, to be honest with you, in our early days, we had a bit of resistance, but I think that's probably because we were new and people were going, who are you? But yeah, so usually we get a positive response.
What have been some of the challenges in terms of resolving a support case?
Good question. I think the challenges are, the challenge, well, there's so many challenges, it depends on the type of situation of the case, but I think some of the challenges are is when, as foster families, you've often been looking after children for quite a number of years, so quite a long time. And as in the time frame that foster parents are looking after the children, the rules around them or the legislation or some aspects of policy change. And those changes are potentially going to have big impacts on the foster family, but there hasn't always been a lot of dialogue and talk happening. So sometimes when we come in, we're the first ones to really open up the conversation and say, well, we really all need to talk about this openly. If this permanency planning now has to radically change because of the new federal legislation or new provincial legislation, then we need to talk about that. And foster families need to have a chance to work through their feelings on this and work out what's going to happen in the next steps and all those things. Because rather than it being hidden away. So some of my challenges are, we may want to talk more honestly and openly, but sometimes the ministry people may feel they can't talk as honestly and openly. I'm not sure, but we really want to have as much transparency as possible.
Information sharing can be an issue sometimes. How do you encourage information sharing between the agencies and people involved?
Yes, that definitely can be a challenge. You're right there. Well, obviously we do it all by consent, even what we can share. Like we make sure we share those consents with those other agencies, so they also know what can and cannot be shared. And similarly, we'll sign any consents that are required of us. Like, so if the ministry requires me to sign consents, I will. To make sure that there isn't those barriers to information sharing. But you're right, and people, often the foster parent is the one worried about what information to share because they are feeling vulnerable. But I think we all often have to talk about, information too is power, and information is often key to resolving a situation. So again, it's not sharing all information, it's sharing the need to know information, like what is the relevant information to share.
What kind of consent forms do foster parents have to sign to access the program?
Krissy, do you want to answer that one?
Hi, yes, I spoke about that earlier. There's the 2 consent forms that you have to sign. That's the gather and documentation, and that's the initial consent form. That's just to have a conversation with us, to gather all the information, whether it's an email or all of your letters. Sometimes they even send you text messages, things like that. The second one is the information and share the meeting participation. So if you would like us to get involved in all of your meetings, anything like that, oath of confidentiality must be signed going in on the MCFD side of things. So those were the main 2 on our end, and then the oath of confidentiality for the MCFD side to join that meeting.
Do you attend meetings with foster parents?
Yes, both Krissy and I do. Yes, we do. Yeah, obviously at the moment we're attending them virtually, but everybody is, so that sort of works out very well. But yeah, we attend the meetings. We can also attend the interviews, like when families are going through an investigation, we can attend the interviews that the foster family is having. I've even attended the interviews with all the children. I've been in one investigation where I think I was along with the social workers for like 5 hours while all the interviews were done.
I think that's all of the questions that were typed in through the Q&A and chat boxes. Let's just pause to see if there are any more questions that need to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Or any people want to ask, because they can ask in person, can't they, if they want to?
Mm-hmm.
Great questions, though.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
No, we're all good.
Nope, we're all good.
Okay, so when we said we're going to send out the PowerPoint to people, and I think it would be useful to send the solutions program manual as well, so people can see that.
Okay. Thank you, Annette and Krissy, for your presentation. We'd like to thank everyone for joining our webinar today. BCFFPA is always here for you. If you have any questions, you can email us at office@bcfosterparents.ca or call 1-800-663-9999. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, thank you.